Welcome back, everybody. Today we're doing things a little different. We're diving into another podcast episode. It's called, If You Know These 15 Phrases, Your English is Amazing.
The idea is that certain phrases can be like a secret code to unlock an fluent and natural sound in English.
That's really interesting. The Source podcast emphasizes learning phrases instead of just individual words. It argues that this approach helps with internalizing grammar and natural speech patterns. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, it makes sense. We don't learn our native languages by memorizing dictionaries. We pick up phrases and expressions organically. It's like absorbing the music of the language.
Right. Think about how children learn language. They start by mimicking phrases, whole chunks of meaning, long before they even understand individual grammar rules.
So are you ready to unlock the secrets of these amazing phrases?
Yeah, let's dive in. I'm curious to see what we find.
Okay, the first phrase that caught my eye is a blessing in disguise. The Source podcast defines it as something that seems bad at first, but turns out to be good. It seems pretty straightforward, but I wonder if there's more to it. It's a classic example of how a phrase can capture a complex idea so concisely, but there's a depth to a blessing in disguise that goes beyond just its definition. It kind of speaks to a certain resilience of the human spirit, a belief that even in adversity, something good can emerge.
You've got me thinking. It's like finding the silver lining in a difficult situation. So much more evocative than just saying something turned out okay.
Exactly. And if you think about it, this idea of hidden blessings has roots in many cultures and philosophies. It's a universal human experience to find meaning and growth in unexpected places.
That's fascinating. It's almost like a little window into the human condition packed into just 4 words.
Exactly. And for someone learning English, understanding the deeper cultural context of a phrase like this can be just as important as knowing its literal meaning.
Okay, so how would you use this phrase in a real conversation?
Okay, let's say you applied for a job but didn't get it. Later, you find an even better opportunity. You might say, missing out on that first job was a blessing in disguise.
I get it. It's a way of expressing gratitude for how things worked out, even if the initial experience was disappointing.
Yeah, it's a way of reframing a negative experience and finding the positive.
All right, ready for the next phrase? This one is bite the bullet. The definition they give is to do something difficult or unpleasant that you've been avoiding. Kind of makes you wonder where it came from, right?
It definitely paints a vivid picture. And the origin is actually quite interesting. It comes from the days before anesthesia was common-like. Soldiers undergoing surgery would literally bite down on a bullet to endure the pain.
Wow. That's a bit more intense than I imagined. So it's not about avoiding something. It's about facing it head on, even if it's going to be tough.
Exactly. Bite the bullet conveys a sense of grit, determination, and accepting a necessary evil. It's about taking action despite fear or discomfort.
I can see how that would be a useful phrase for anyone, not just English learners.
Absolutely. We all have those tasks or situations we'd rather avoid. So next time you're facing something unpleasant, think of those brave soldiers and bite the bullet.
I will. I bet that mental image will definitely get me moving. Now let's move on to a phrase that I think we can all relate to, especially in social situations. It's break the ice. The Source podcast says it means to start a conversation in a social situation. Pretty self-explanatory, right?
It seems straightforward, but break the ice is actually quite nuanced. It's not just about starting any conversation. It's about easing tension, creating a sense of warmth and connection, often using humor or lightheartedness.
So it's not just about saying hello. It's about creating an atmosphere where people feel comfortable opening up. It's almost like you're setting the tone for the interaction.
Exactly. Imagine you're at a party where you don't know many people. Instead of launching into a deep discussion, you might break the ice by making a playful comment about the food or the music.
That's a great example. Or let's say you're at a networking event. You could break the ice by asking someone about their work in a casual, non-intimidating way.
Precisely. It's about making that initial connection feel natural and enjoyable.
Okay, this next one is a phrase I find myself using quite often, especially after a long day of recording. It's call it a day. The definition they give is to stop working on something. I'm curious, is there anything interesting to unpack here?
There is. Call it a day isn't just about stopping work. It's about drawing a clear boundary between effort and rest. It signifies a conscious decision to step away, to recharge, and to acknowledge that you've done enough for now.
I never thought of it that way, but it makes total sense. It's not about giving up. It's about recognizing your limits and prioritizing well-being.
Exactly. It's a healthy way to manage your energy and avoid burnout. And it can apply to anything, not just work. You can call it a day on a hobby project, a workout, or even a frustrating argument.
That's a good point. It's about knowing when to step back and regroup.
Right. And it's a phrase that's understood across many cultures. It speaks to a universal human need for balance and renewal.
All right, let's move on to a phrase that's often used in a professional context. Cut corners. The Source podcast says it means to do something in a cheaper or easier way that's not always good. What are your thoughts on this one?
Cut corners is interesting because it's almost always used negatively. It suggests a compromise in quality or ethics, a willingness to sacrifice excellence for speed or convenience.
It's like taking the easy way out, even if it means the end result won't be as good.
Exactly. And the imagery is powerful, isn't it? Cutting corners suggests strain from a proven path, a deviation that can lead to unforeseen consequences.
Makes me think of builders who use cheap materials to save money, but then the building isn't safe. Or a student who cheats on an exam to get a better grade.
Those are perfect examples. Cutting corners often leads to problems down the road. It might save time or effort in the short term, but it rarely pays off in the long run.
It sounds like a warning as much as a phrase.
It is. It reminds us that true success comes from doing things the right way, even if it's harder.
Okay, are you ready for a phrase that might get a bit wild?
Bring it on. I'm all ears.
This one is get out of hand. The Source podcast defines it as something becomes difficult to control. I have a feeling this one could apply to a lot of situations.
You're right. Get out of hand is all about a loss of control. A situation escalating beyond its intended boundaries. It can be lighthearted, like a party getting a bit too rowdy, but it can also describe more serious situations.
I can see that. Like a peaceful protest turning into a riot or a friendly debate escalating into a heated argument. It sounds like a phrase that captures a loss of order.
Precisely. It implies a sense of chaos, unpredictability, and often regret that things went too far.
So how would someone learning English use this phrase correctly?
Let's say you planned a small gathering, but word spread and suddenly your house is full of people. You could say, things got a little out of hand.
That's a great example. It's not blaming anyone. It's just acknowledging that the situation took on a life of its own.
Exactly. It's a way of describing a situation where things didn't go according to plan, but with a touch of humor and resignation.
Okay, on to a phrase that's all about getting things right. Hit the nail on the head. The definition is to be exactly right about something. I feel like this one is universally satisfying, don't you?
It is. Hitting the nail on the head implies accuracy, precision, and a sense of mastery. The imagery is so vivid, like driving a nail straight in with one perfect strike.
Yeah, it's like that aha moment when you finally understand something. Or when someone perfectly articulates what you've been struggling to express. It's almost like a verbal bullseye.
Exactly. And it's a phrase that's often used to acknowledge someone's insight or to express agreement. Imagine you're brainstorming ideas and someone suggests a solution that perfectly addresses the problem. You might say, you hit the nail on the head.
It's like saying, you get it. You've nailed the essence of the issue.
Precisely. It's a way of celebrating clarity, shared understanding, and finding that perfect solution.
Okay, up next is a phrase that's all about communication, especially in team settings. It's keep someone in the loop. The Source podcast defines it as to keep someone informed about what's happening. What do you think is important to highlight here?
Keep someone in the loop highlights the importance of transparency and inclusion. It's about making sure everyone involved has the information they need to contribute effectively and to feel like they're part of the process.
Yeah, it makes me think of those frustrating situations where you're left out of the loop and then suddenly expected to be up to speed on a project.
Exactly. Keeping someone in the loop is about respecting everyone's time and preventing those kinds of misunderstandings. It's about proactive communication and building trust.
So how might someone use this phrase in a way that's natural and fluent?
Let's say you're working on a project with a team and you have a meeting where key decisions are made. You could say to someone who couldn't attend, "Don't worry, I'll keep you in the loop on what was decided."
I can see how that would be reassuring and make someone feel included even if they weren't physically present. It's about maintaining those communication lines even when things get busy.
Exactly. It shows consideration and a commitment to collaboration.
Okay, are you ready for a phrase that's a bit more mischievous?
I love a good dose of mischief. Let's hear it.
This one is let the cat out of the bag. The Source podcast defines it as to reveal a secret. It sounds harmless enough, but I wonder if there's a deeper meaning behind it.
There is. Let the cat out of the bag suggests a certain playfulness, a lighthearted approach to revealing something that was supposed to be hidden.
I like how it doesn't have to be a serious betrayal. It could be an accidental slip-up or even a deliberate but good-natured reveal.
You've got it. It's a way of adding a touch of humor or surprise to a situation where a secret is revealed.
So how could someone use this in a conversation?
Imagine you're planning a surprise party for a friend. If someone accidentally mentions the party in front of the friend, you might say, "Oops, you let the cat out of the bag."
It's almost like you're acknowledging the mistake, but in a way that doesn't make the situation too serious or awkward.
Exactly. It's about keeping things light and fun, even when a secret is spilled.
All right, up next is a phrase that suggests competence and being prepared. It's on the ball. The definition they give is being alert and efficient. I'm picturing someone who's always one step ahead. What are your thoughts?
You're right on the mark. Being on the ball implies a sharpness of mind, a readiness to act, and a proactive approach to whatever comes your way. It's a compliment that suggests someone is both capable and reliable.
So it's not just about being smart. It's about being prepared and able to anticipate what's needed.
Precisely. It's about being mentally and physically ready to handle any situation that arises. It comes from the world of sports, particularly baseball, where being on the ball means being ready to catch it.
So it's about being focused, alert, and in the zone. I can see how that would be a valuable quality in any field.
Absolutely. Think of a colleague who always anticipates problems before they arise, or a student who's always on top of their assignments. They're both on the ball, demonstrating a commitment to excellence.
Okay, time for a phrase that I think everyone loves to use, at least occasionally. It's pull someone's leg. The definition is to joke or tease someone. This one always makes me smile, especially when it's done well.
It's such a playful phrase. Pulling someone's leg involves a bit of gentle deception, a playful misdirection that's meant to elicit a laugh or a surprised reaction.
It's like a verbal prank, but with a good-natured intention.
Exactly. It's about creating a moment of shared humor, a bond of playfulness between people.
I'm thinking of a time when my friend told me she'd won the lottery and I was so excited for her. Then she revealed she was just pulling my leg.
That's a perfect example. It's about creating a brief moment of disbelief before the truth is revealed, all in the spirit of fun.
It's important to do it with people who understand your humor, though. You don't want to accidentally hurt anyone's feelings or cause genuine confusion.
That's a good point. It's all about gauging the situation and using this phrase with people who appreciate that kind of playful banter.
Okay, ready for a phrase that's a bit spooky, but in a fun way.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
This one is speak of the devil. The Source podcast defines it as that the person you were talking about has just appeared. This is one of those phrases I've always wondered about. It seems almost magical, right?
It does have a touch of the supernatural, doesn't it? Speak of the devil acknowledges a strange coincidence that the very person you were just discussing has suddenly materialized.
It's like they were summoned by the mere mention of their name.
It's fascinating, isn't it? This phrase actually comes from a longer saying, "Speak of the devil, and he doth appear." It reflects a long-held superstition that talking about the devil might actually cause him to show up.
That's a bit creepy. But I can see how that evolved into the more lighthearted phrase we use today. It's like we're acknowledging the oddness of the coincidence without taking the superstition too seriously.
Exactly. It's become a playful way to express surprise and amusement at someone's unexpected arrival. Imagine you're catching up with a friend, and you mention another friend you haven't seen in ages. Suddenly, that friend walks into the cafe.
You'd say, speak of the devil.
Exactly. It's a way of acknowledging the funny timing and welcoming them into the conversation.
It's a great example of how a phrase can evolve over time and take on a new meaning while still retaining a bit of its original flavor.
It highlights how language is constantly changing and adapting to new social contexts.
Okay, this next one is all about taking things with a grain of salt. The Source podcast defines it as not to take something too seriously. What are your thoughts?
Take it with a grain of salt is a fantastic phrase for navigating the sea of information we encounter every day. It encourages a healthy skepticism, a critical thinking approach that recognizes not everything we hear or read is entirely true or accurate.
So it's about being discerning and not blindly accepting everything at face value?
Precisely. It's about recognizing that information can be biased, incomplete, or even intentionally misleading.
It's like that saying, consider the source.
Exactly. Take it with a grain of salt. Empowers you to evaluate information thoughtfully and to form your own conclusions.
How might someone use this phrase naturally in a conversation?
Let's say you read a sensational headline online about a celebrity scandal. You might say to a friend, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt until I hear more details.
It's a way of saying, I'm not going to jump to conclusions based on limited information.
Exactly. It demonstrates a cautious and thoughtful approach to information consumption.
All right, let's dive into a phrase that's all about taking action. The ball is in your court. The Source podcast defines it as it's your turn to take action. It seems pretty straightforward, but I'm curious if there's more to uncover here.
The ball is in your court is a clear and concise way to hand over responsibility. It acknowledges that a certain stage of a process has been completed and that it's now someone else's turn to make a decision or take the next step.
It makes me think of a tennis match where the ball literally goes back and forth.
That's exactly where it comes from. It's a powerful metaphor for how responsibility shifts in interactions.
It's a great way to signal that you've done your part and that you're waiting for a response or action from the other person.
Absolutely. Imagine you've sent a proposal to a client and you've followed up a few times. You might say, I've given you all the information you need. The ball is in your court now.
It's a way of being assertive without being aggressive.
Yeah.
You're clearly stating that you're waiting for them to take the next step.
Exactly. It's a polite but firm way to move things forward.
Okay, ready for a phrase that's a universal truth we all experience?
I'm all ears.
This one is time flies. The Source podcast defines it as time passes very quickly. This is one of those phrases that just makes you pause and reflect, right?
It does. Time flies speaks to the fleeting nature of time and how easily it seems to slip away. It's a sentiment that's been expressed in many cultures and languages throughout history.
It's like we're all on this fast-moving train, and sometimes it feels like we're just watching the scenery rush by.
Exactly. It's a reminder to be present and to savor each moment. Because time waits for no one.
How might someone use this phrase in a conversation?
Imagine you're catching up with an old friend you haven't seen in years. You might say, it's amazing how time flies. It feels like just yesterday we were in high school.
It's a way of expressing a sense of wonder and a bit of nostalgia for how quickly time has passed.
Precisely. It's a way to connect with someone over shared experiences and to acknowledge the passage of time.
All right, that covers the first 8 phrases. I'm already feeling like I have a whole new set of tools to express myself in English. It's amazing how these seemingly simple phrases could be so packed with meaning.
It's true. Each phrase is like a little window into the history, culture, and psychology of the language.
I'm excited to explore the rest of these amazing phrases and see what other insights we uncover.
Let's do it. I have a feeling there are even more gems waiting to be discovered.
All right, we're back. Ready to tackle the next batch of phrases from the podcast. If you know these 15 phrases, your English is amazing. We've already uncovered some fascinating insights, but I have a feeling there's much more to explore. Where should we pick up?
Let's jump into a phrase that often comes up when we need to make a decision, especially when it comes to risky ventures. It's go out on a limb. The Source podcast defines it as to do something risky or something that people might criticize. What are your thoughts on this one?
Go out on a limb. Definitely paints a vivid picture in my mind. I imagine someone carefully stepping onto a tree branch that's extending away from the trunk, unsure if it will hold their weight.
That's a great visualization. The phrase evokes a sense of vulnerability and uncertainty, doesn't it? It suggests taking a chance, putting yourself in a potentially precarious position, but also implies a willingness to stand out from the crowd.
It's like taking a leap of faith, knowing that there's a chance you might fall, but also a chance you might reach something amazing.
Exactly. It takes courage to go out on a limb, to deviate from the well-trodden path and pursue something unconventional or untested.
So how would you use this phrase in a real conversation?
Let's say a friend is considering quitting their stable job to start their own business. You might say, I know it's risky, but I think you should go out on a limb and pursue your dream.
It's like you're encouraging them to take that leap of faith, even though it might be scary.
Right. Go out on a limb suggests supporting someone's bold decision, even if it goes against conventional wisdom.
Okay, this next phrase is all about getting down to business and tackling a task head on. It's get the ball rolling. The Source podcast defines it as to start something. Where do you think this one comes from?
Get the ball rolling implies a sense of momentum, doesn't it? Like setting something in motion that will continue to move forward.
Yeah, it makes me think of a bowling ball heading down the lane, knocking down pins along the way.
Exactly. And that's likely where the phrase originated from, the physical act of starting a game or activity.
So how might someone use this phrase in a way that sounds natural and fluent?
Let's say you're leading a team meeting and you want to brainstorm ideas for a new project. You might say, all right, let's get the ball rolling by sharing any initial thoughts you have.
It's like you're giving everyone permission to jump in and contribute, creating a sense of forward movement.
Precisely. It's a way to initiate action and encourage participation.
All right, up next is a phrase that suggests a shift in perspective, a change in approach. It's go back to the drawing board. The Source podcast defines it as to start planning something again because the first plan failed. What stands out to you about this phrase?
Go back to the drawing board is a fantastic phrase because it encourages resilience and adaptability. It recognizes that failure is often a part of the process and that instead of giving up, we can learn from our mistakes and try again.
It's like hitting a roadblock. But instead of seeing it as the end of the road, you see it as an opportunity to reroute and find a new path.
Exactly. It emphasizes the importance of iteration and being willing to start over, even if it means admitting that the first attempt didn't work out.
So how would someone use this phrase in a way that reflects its nuanced meaning?
Imagine a team has been working on a marketing campaign that's not getting the desired results. They might say, it's time to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new strategy.
It's like saying, okay, that didn't work, but we're not giving up. We're going to take what we've learned and use it to create something even better.
Exactly. It's about embracing failure as a learning opportunity and maintaining a positive attitude in the face of setbacks.
This next one is for all those situations where you find yourself in over your head, maybe a bit overwhelmed. It's in over your head. The Source podcast defines it as to be involved in a difficult situation that you can't control. What are your thoughts on this one?
In over your head captures that feeling of being overwhelmed, of facing a challenge that exceeds your current abilities or resources. It can be a stressful situation, but it can also be a catalyst for growth.
Yeah, it's like swimming in the deep end when you're still learning how to stay afloat. It can be scary, but it can also force you to learn quickly.
Exactly. Sometimes being in over your head is the only way to truly push your limits and discover what you're capable of.
So how would someone use this phrase in a way that reflects its nuanced meaning?
Imagine a student who's taken a really challenging course and struggling to keep up. They might say, I'm in over my head in this class. I need to get some extra help.
It's a way of acknowledging the difficulty of the situation and seeking support when needed.
Right. It's about recognizing your limitations and not being afraid to ask for help.
Okay, this next one is a bit more lighthearted and playful. It's miss the boat. The Source podcast defines it as to miss an opportunity. I feel like this one is pretty self-explanatory, but I'm curious if there's anything we can unpack here.
You're right, miss the boat is a fairly straightforward phrase, but it can also convey a sense of regret or disappointment at a missed opportunity. It's a reminder to be proactive and to seize opportunities when they arise.
It makes me think of someone running frantically toward a departing ship, just barely missing the chance to climb aboard.
That's a great visual. It captures the feeling of frustration and the realization that you were just a little too late.
So how would you use this phrase in a real conversation?
Let's say your friend tells you about a great investment opportunity that they didn't take advantage of. You might say, oh, that's too bad you missed the boat on that one.
It's a way of acknowledging the missed opportunity while also expressing a bit of sympathy.
Exactly. It's a gentle reminder that sometimes you have to act decisively to grab those chances that come your way.
Okay, on to a phrase that I think we've all experienced at some point in our lives. It's on cloud nine. The Source podcast defines it as to be extremely happy. What are your initial thoughts on this one?
On cloud nine is a beautiful phrase because it evokes a sense of pure joy, a feeling of being lifted above everyday worries and concerns.
It's like you're floating above the world, feeling light and carefree. It's a delightful image.
It is, and it's interesting to note that different cultures have different ways of expressing extreme happiness. In English, we talk about being on cloud nine, but in other languages, there might be metaphors about flying high like a bird or feeling as light as a feather.
That's fascinating. So how might you use this phrase in a way that captures its true essence?
Imagine a friend just got engaged. You might say, you must be on cloud nine, congratulations.
It's a way of acknowledging their overwhelming happiness and sharing in their joy.
Exactly. It's a way of celebrating those special moments in life when everything feels perfect.
Okay, this next one is all about taking a break and stepping back from a situation. It's piece of cake. The Source podcast defines it as something is very easy to do. I'm curious about the origin of this one. It seems a bit random, doesn't it?
It does seem a bit odd at first glance, doesn't it? To compare something easy to a piece of cake. But it's thought to have originated in the late 19th century, possibly from the practice of giving cakes as prizes at competitions or fairs. Winning a cake was seen as an easy feat.
So it's not about the actual cake itself, but about the ease with which it could be won.
Exactly. It's about comparing a task to something that's effortless and enjoyable.
So how might someone use this phrase in a conversation?
Let's say a friend asks you for help with a simple task, like setting up their new phone. You might say, "No problem, that's a piece of cake."
It's a way of reassuring them that the task is nothing to worry about and that you can handle it with ease.
Precisely. It's a confident and reassuring way to respond to a request.
Okay, this next phrase is all about putting your foot down and setting boundaries. It's put your foot down. The Source podcast defines it as to refuse to change your mind about something. I'm curious, is there a deeper meaning to this one?
Put your foot down is all about asserting yourself, about establishing clear boundaries and refusing to be swayed. It suggests strength of character and a willingness to stand up for what you believe in.
It's like you're planting your foot firmly on the ground, refusing to budge.
That's a great way to visualize it. It conveys a sense of resolve and determination.
So how might someone use this phrase in a way that conveys its full meaning?
Imagine a teenager whose parents want them to come home early from a party. If the teenager wants to stay out later, they might put their foot down and argue for their independence.
It's like saying, I've made up my mind and I'm not going to change it no matter what.
Exactly. It's about standing firm in your convictions, even when faced with opposition.
Okay, onto a phrase that suggests a sense of urgency and importance. It's rule of thumb. The Source podcast defines it as a general rule. What are your thoughts?
Rule of thumb is an interesting phrase because it highlights the practical side of knowledge. It suggests a guideline that's based on experience and common sense rather than strict scientific principles.
It's like a shortcut to making decisions based on what's generally worked in the past.
Exactly. It's about relying on tried and true methods that have proven to be effective in most situations.
So how would someone use this phrase in a conversation?
Let's say you're giving someone advice on how to cook rice. You might say, as a rule of thumb, you should use 2 cups of water for every cup of rice.
It's a way of sharing a helpful guideline that's generally accurate, but not necessarily set in stone.
Precisely. It's about offering practical advice based on experience and common sense.
Okay, the last phrase on our list is one that suggests a change of heart. A decision to abandon a plan. It's throw in the towel. The Source podcast defines it as to give up. What are your initial thoughts on this one?
Throw in the towel is a powerful phrase because it acknowledges defeat, a moment when you decide to stop fighting and accept the outcome, even if it's not what you hoped for.
It makes me think of a boxer who's been knocked down too many times and realizes they can't win the fight.
Exactly. It comes from the world of boxing, where throwing a towel into the ring signals that a fighter has given up.
So how might someone use this phrase in a conversation?
Let's say someone has been working tirelessly on a project that just isn't coming together. After repeated setbacks, they might say, I'm throwing in the towel on this one. It's just not working.
It's a way of admitting defeat and deciding to move on to something else.
Exactly. It's about recognizing when it's time to let go and focus your energy elsewhere.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. From the vulnerability of going out on a limb, to the resilience of going back to the drawing board, to the playful teasing of pulling someone's leg. We've explored a wide range of emotions and situations.
It's amazing how these 15 phrases can encapsulate so much of the human experience, isn't it? They offer a glimpse into how we navigate challenges, celebrate successes, and connect with each other through language.
Yeah, I'm already feeling more confident about using these phrases in my own conversations. It's like a secret decoder ring for understanding and using English more effectively.
That's the power of language. By understanding the nuances and origins of these phrases, you're not just learning words. You're unlocking a whole new way of thinking and expressing yourself.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the overall message of this deep dive. What do you hope our listeners take away from this exploration of amazing English phrases?
I think the biggest takeaway is that learning a language is so much more than just memorizing vocabulary. It's about understanding the culture, the humor, the way people express themselves in different situations.
Absolutely. These 15 phrases are just a starting point. There's a whole universe of expressions, idioms, and colloquialisms out there. Each one a little window into the soul of the English language.
And as we've seen, many of these phrases have fascinating origins and deeper meanings that go beyond their literal definitions. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, revealing hidden depths and connections.
Yeah, it makes language learning so much more engaging, doesn't it? It's not just about rote memorization. It's about discovery, exploration, and making connections between words, ideas, and cultures.
I was a bit skeptical at first about diving into a podcast episode about English phrases. I thought, how much could there really be to say about these everyday expressions? But I've been pleasantly surprised by how much we've uncovered.
I'm glad to hear that. And I think it speaks to the fact that even the most familiar things can be full of surprises and hidden depths. It's all about having that curiosity and that willingness to look beyond the surface.
So for our listeners who are on their own language learning journeys, what advice would you give them for incorporating these phrases and continuing to expand their English skills?
First and foremost, don't be afraid to experiment. Try using these phrases in your conversations, even if you're not sure if you're using them perfectly. The more you practice, the more natural they'll become.
That's great advice. It's all about getting out of your comfort zone and just trying things out.
What other tips do you have?
Pay attention to how native speakers use these phrases in context. Watch movies, listen to podcasts, read books, and observe how these expressions are woven into everyday conversations.
That's a great point. It's like immersing yourself in the language and absorbing it organically.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of repetition. The more you hear and use these phrases, the more they'll become embedded in your memory.
This deep dive has really highlighted the importance of not just learning the what of language, but the why and the how. It's about understanding the context, the nuances, and the cultural baggage that each phrase carries.
It's about making those connections, seeing the patterns, and appreciating the richness and complexity of language.
And it's about having fun with it. Don't take it too seriously. Embrace the playful side of language. Experiment with different expressions and enjoy the journey of discovery.
Well said. Language learning should be a joyful experience. It's about expanding your horizons, connecting with other cultures, and expressing yourself in new and creative ways.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep practicing, and keep those ears open for those amazing phrases that can unlock a whole new level of fluency and confidence in English.
And remember, time flies, so make the most of every opportunity to learn and grow.
That's a great reminder. We've certainly seen how much we can learn in just one deep dive into these 15 phrases. Imagine what you can discover if you keep that curiosity alive and embrace the endless possibilities of language.
Until next time, happy language learning.